Hi guys, welcome to our daily encounter. Jeremiah lived in a society with many voices. And some of the voices were good. We could think of people who lived during the lifetime of Jeremiah, such as Huldah. We could think of Zephaniah, Habakkuk, Daniel, and Ezekiel also are around the time of Jeremiah later on in his life. But there were a lot of good prophets who were proclaiming the word of the Lord. They were holding the people accountable and were teaching the truth. But then there were also voices that were false and voices that were giving the people false hope. We could think of Ahab and Zedekiah and Hananiah that we'll read about. These were false prophets that were around at the time of Jeremiah. But these are just a small sample of a large group of false prophets that were around that were telling the people, you're fine, don't worry about it. They kept saying, peace, peace, peace. It's going to be okay. God's going to protect us. Everything is going to turn out just fine. And so there were a lot of voices going on in the time of Jeremiah. And the Lord speaks into this in our reading today in Jeremiah 23. And particularly with the false prophets. In verse 21, he says, I did not send these prophets, but they ran. And I did not speak to them, but they prophesied. But if they had stood in my counsel, then they would have announced my words to my people and would have turned them back from their evil way and from the evil of their deeds. So these false prophets were not sent by the Lord. The Lord had not spoken to them. And if they'd only spoken what was true, then they could have actually turned that generation around and turned them back to the Lord. But they weren't doing that. They were basically just tickling their ears, telling them what they wanted to hear, and not being any benefit to them at all, and actually was leading them down the path of destruction and leading them into a pathway of sin. And so as we reflect on this, we can think about our own society and realize that we too live in a society with a lot of voices. There are good, sound voices out there that are proclaiming the truth, that are leading people into greater holiness and drawing people closer to the Lord. But then there's also voices that are drawing people away from the Lord and that are placing doubt in people's minds in connection to faith and drawing them away from God and His Word and things like that. And so as we try to live in the midst of a society with so many voices, we have to consider, what voices are we going to listen to? Just as the people in Jeremiah's generation had to consider which voices they would listen to, we have to consider that as well. And I think this verse, particularly verse 22, shows us, how we can determine if we're listening to the right voice. There it says again, but if they had stood in my counsel, then they would have announced my words to my people. Okay, so if they had stood in his counsel, if they've been seeking God's counsel and what to say, they would have announced God's word to the people. And then the result, it says, and would have turned them back from their evil way and from the evil of their deeds. And that's the key to understanding whether we're listening to good voices or bad voices. Are they leading us into a greater holiness and sanctification? Are they leading us to greater love and compassion? Are they leading us more into the image of Christ? Or are they leading us further and further into evil deeds and into sin? Whatever voices we're listening to, if we're listening to them on social media, on YouTube, whatever platform we might be listening to these voices, it might even be voices around our own dinner table, whatever it might be, we have to ask ourselves, is this voice a voice that I should be listening to? Is this a voice that I should be heeding? And we can answer that question by saying, are they drawing me closer to the Lord? Are they helping me to walk further and further away from sin? Or are they leading me into the very grasp of sin? And that can be a good indicator as to whether or not this is a voice we should listen to or not. So as we read today in Jeremiah 23, let's reflect on this quite a bit. And maybe today we could even really tune our ear into the voices that are around us and begin to maybe make a game out of it. Kind of just try to say, okay, which is this voice a part of the good voices that I should be listening to? Or is this voice one of the bad voices I should not be listening to? And begin to practice discerning between those two. And I think that the more and more we do that, the more and more it'll become natural to us and instinctive to us to know, okay, this is a voice I should listen to. This is a voice I should not listen to. And of course, we also get more tuned into that as we get deeper and deeper into God's word and get God's word more and more in our hearts, as it too would allow us to distinguish between these these different voices. So these are some things we can reflect on and think about as we do our reading today. With that, guys, I do thank you for watching the video today. Hope you guys have a great day. Love you guys. God bless.